Joining me right now is former Whitewater independent counsel and former federal prosecutor Robert Ray, along with journalist John Solomon. Great to have you both with us, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here. Robert Ray, let me kick this off with you. It's incredible that we're still talking about this. You heard what Nancy Pelosi just said. She was walking into the meeting on infrastructure with the president, but before she got to the president, she's talked to reporters, and she said he is obstructing and he's covering up something. Is this impeachable? What is the cover-up?
Well, cover-up, of course, we know is a loaded term, and it comes from Watergate. And it's a bit of a cheap shot under these circumstances because she's not talking about the underlying Mueller investigation. What she's talking about essentially is the process arguments that are going on right now between two branches of government, between the legislature, the Congress, and the administration, the executive branch, over executive privilege, court fights with regard to what Congress's right to access is concerning information. Again, that's all a process and a procedural argument. That same argument, by the way, was made during Watergate. It was the third of 3 impeachment articles, and it went nowhere because there was no Republican support of that impeachment article, largely because everybody understood that the president has the right to defend both his administration and all future administrations, as the president himself indicated, in connection with fights, interbranch fights, and issues regarding separation of powers. So the notion, I mean, look, the Democrats criticized the president and the attorney general for use of the word spy or spying. Right. And now you have Nancy Pelosi using a loaded word, which clearly was aimed at appeasing the more liberal faction of the Democratic Party, because she made a substantive decision which her party supported, and that is, we're not going down the impeachment road now. Now, they say that. Whether that remains to be true in the future, of course, is something only time will tell.
But what I said earlier was that, you know, in this country, you're not supposed to find the guy and then say, let's find the crime. That's what they've done. What you do is you identify a crime and you pursue it, and who broke the law. But here, it's very different. They want to take down Donald Trump, and that's what they're doing. So, you know, I mean, I understand what he's saying. How is he going to be negotiating an infrastructure package when they are all talking about impeaching him and investigating every corner of his life?
He is, after all, the president of the United States,
right.
And you would think that the Speaker of the House would have more inherent respect for a coordinate branch of government than to be throwing around loaded terms like a cover-up, particularly when substantively she made the right call, which is that the country really, it is not in the country's interest to be traveling down the road of impeachment. And frankly, it's not in the Democratic Party's political interest to be doing that. I mean, right now,
especially since John Solomon, you could argue that she's actually covering up what we know took place in the 2016 election, and that is the fact that there was a cabal of people, as you've reported so well on, and I've reported on, that wanted to stop Donald Trump and put informants at people in his campaign, you know, wiretap them based on, so far, what looks like was no predicate, based on nothing. There was nothing that the president did or anybody in his campaign did, as we know from the Mueller report, that would trigger such an investigation.
Yeah, no, listen, when I came to town 30 years ago, there was people like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, George Mitchell and Bob Dole, and they had a rule. There was a place for politics, there was a place for doing the people's business, and you didn't mix the two whenever you could avoid it. And yesterday there was a great opportunity to do the people's business, to talk about infrastructure, try to solve a real pressing problem for the country, and instead politics blew the whole thing up. And that's a sad thing for the American people, and I think people will look back at the stunt that was played yesterday and look with shame at a time when we need leadership, not more politics. But right now, I think what you see with Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats is a concern that what Bill Barr is doing, what the Inspector General is doing, what I did last night with the FISA court and filing a motion to get more information out, that we're in a process now where the Democratic charade, the fake story of Christopher Steele, is going to be exposed for what it is, and they're trying to change the subject from anything but that.
Yeah, so let me go back to that, because last night you filed this motion asking the FISA court to unseal evidence of wrongdoing related to the Russia investigation. Tell me what you're looking for under the Freedom of Information Act and what you think is going on here.
Yep. So the court works under very specific rules, and so you have to file a motion as an intervener and ask the court, as a member of the public, as a representative of the public, as a reporter, we're asking you in the public interest, would you release any information that shows that you have evidence of wrongdoing or disciplinary action? There's a history for this. If you remember, at the very beginning of the FISA scandal, I wrote a series of stories about something else the court talked about, which was at the very end of the Obama Justice Department. They walked in just a few days before Election Day when Donald Trump won and said, oh, we had all these violations we hid from you, the court, for more than 5 years. And the court released that, which is a very rare thing. And they said of the people who are running the Justice Department, you suffer from, the court said, you suffer from an institutional lack of candor. That's the same Justice Department, the same FBI that was involved in starting the collusion case, using Christopher Steele despite all the concerns. The court has expressed concern about that Justice Department, and we've asked if there's more concern because of what happened in the Carter Page FISA, please let us know. It's in the public interest to know that.
So you filed this motion. When are you expecting to hear back?
You know, it's at the mercy of the court, literally,
yeah.
And it operates in such secrecy. But we're
well,
saying
how far up the ladder do you think this goes? I mean, we know that John Brennan. There was an email which Trey Gowdy broke news on my show on Sunday that there's an email from December of 2016 from Jim Comey to his upper echelon staff. That includes Baker and Andrew McCabe, where he says Brennan is insisting to include the Crown material in the intel assessment. The Crown material is the dossier. The intel assessment is the assessment that Russia was meddling. So Brennan says include Donald Trump in the Russia meddling assessment.
Answer all the way up the chain.
You think it goes all the way up the chain?
I do. I mean, look.
To President Obama.
A day of reckoning is near. I don't know about that, but I do know that with regard to leadership within the intelligence community, and I believe also within the higher reaches of the Justice Department, there were too many people who knew about this, and there were, as John correctly points out, right on the the eve of change in administrations and the eve of the election, there's too much indication that there are games being played about what is and what is not disclosed after review by supervisors to the FISA court. And that has always been, in my mind, the most important thing to uncover. Who knew and at what level? How much did they know? And of that, why did not all of it make its way into the FISA application?
Do you think we're going to see accountability? And it's the same question for you, John. Do you think we're going to see accountability? You're talking about John Brennan, Clapper, Jim Comey, Andrew McCabe. Will we see accountability for investigating somebody who they just simply did not like based on no predicate? That's what we know so far.
That, I think, is why the intelligence community is so worried at the moment, because it's one thing to say that it's limited to Inspector General Horowitz's report because he only has jurisdiction over what amounts to disciplinary action with regard to current employees of the department.
Right, he can't subpoena.
Once the Attorney General made the decision to, with a special delegation of authority to a U.S. attorney in Connecticut, that carries with it ultimately and implicitly prosecutorial power, not limited to Department of Justice employees, but everybody else, which includes the intelligence community. And that's what the concern is. And so the answer to your question is, yes, I do. Now, whether that ultimately results in prosecutions or not, I don't know. We don't know enough to know whether or not there are criminal cases there.
Hit on it.
But the key to understanding what's going on here is that there's broader authority. It comes directly from the Attorney General, and that means everybody. And everybody means everybody, not just department employees.
That's why they want to rip Bill Barr right now. John Solomon, you got the last word here.
I agree with everything Robert just said. This is going to be a far-reaching investigation, and the intelligence community is concerned, and it is put on notice, as Kevin Brock wrote yesterday, all of their actions are being scrutinized.
Unbelievable. What a story. Robert Ray, John Solomon, great to have you both on the program.